It was the morning of September 21st, 2006. I had finished eating breakfast early that morning and it tasted so good. Then I was ready to go hunting. I got all of my clothes on and got ready to head out. Once I was out there, I remembered that I forgot my flashlight. I figured that I wouldn't see anything and come back in around lunch and get my flashlight. 4 hours later, I could see deer in the field still, so I couldn't leave and get the flashlight because I was planning on going back out to the stand the next day. The deer were as hungry as someone who hasn't eaten in 3 days. They stayed in the field for good 3 hours. I was waiting for a buck to come by so I could get my first buck with a bow and an arrow, so I sat thinking to myself if I should go get new batteries or wait a little while until the deer go away. I decided to wait another hour before I scare all the deer off so I could go get the batteries. About 20 minutes later, I saw some movement in the brush maybe 10 minuscule yards away from my tree stand. I could see the antlers moving among the skinny tree branches. I grasped my bow and nocked an arrow. I got ready for it. When it came out of the brush, I would pull back and fire. It peeked its head out and checked the field for does. Once it seemed satisfied with the deer in the field at that moment, it slowly crept around the edge of the thick brush. I let it get past my stand before I stood up and drew back the bow. I bent at the waist and held that position for what felt like an eternity. I slowly made a fist on the trigger of my release. The deer kicked its hind legs up in the air like a donkey. That is how I knew I had hit him. A rule of thumb for after you hit a deer with a bow is to wait a good hour before you go find it so it's time to lie down and die. I wasn't sure where I hit him, and it was getting dark now, so I figured I would give it an extra hour before I left to find him. By then it was getting very dark out, and I wasn't sure if I'd given it enough time. I climbed down from my tree stand and went to look for my arrow. Once I found it, I checked for the blood on it. It was very dark red with bubbles. This indicates that it was a long shot considering it had air bubbles. I was confident that the deer hadn't gone too far. I followed the trail to where I had last seen it running. The trail continued to get wider and wider with blood. I came upon a wide river that I had never known about before. I put my bow above my head and started wading across. I could feel the cold water drain into my boots. Once I got to the other side, I looked for the blood trail. Then I remembered that the river would have probably cleaned out the wound. I would have a tougher time finding where the trail continued. I marked the last spot of blood on the other side of the river that I had found with my hat and could come back the next morning with my dad so he could help me find the deer. As I turned to where I thought was home, I heard a pack of coyotes howl in between the field and myself. I was not prepared to take on a pack of coyotes with my bow and arrow. By then I was getting cold with all of my clothes wet, and I took a different route to walk along the river for a while and cut back towards the field. I was going completely by instinct. I had been walking for at least 20 minutes, which was too long in my mind before I would be somewhere else where I knew where I was. I knew I had lost, but I tried to stay calm. Deep down, I was really scared. Even though the howling stopped, I knew the coyotes were still there. I made it back to the field, and I was relieved. Once I made it back to the cabin, my dad was wondering why it took me so long. I said, "Dude, I got lost tracking, but I made it back because you taught me so well." He replied, "Well, good. I was about to come looking for you." "Good thing you didn't," I exclaimed. Then a smile came to his face when he said, "Well, let's go get this buck." He was relieved I made it back and glad I shot my first buck. We immediately refilled the batteries and were ready to go get the buck the next morning. We walked out and I showed him where I got lost and where the river was. When we found the deer not an hour after looking. I now know that you have to be prepared for the worst, and no matter what happens, being prepared can keep you safe and out of trouble. If I was prepared, none of this chaos would have happened. That is my stuff.